I need to talk about Dale Carnegie. More specifically, Dale Carnegie's famous book known as How to Win Friends and Influence People. I do a lot of driving and listening to things in my car, and I really was just looking for something kind of non-musical, as I spend most of my days doing musical things. Most of my podcasts were either on hold or weren't really interesting to me, so I decided to dig back into audiobooks from my local library. That said, I didn't really know what I was looking for, so I just kind of browsed a little bit, and eventually I remembered this book from somewhere. Somewhere in the depths of my memories, I had heard this title before and thought, you know what? Maybe it's worth a listen, and maybe I'll learn something from it. Maybe there's something interesting that stands out or makes it so timeless and memorable. If you're just here to see what I learned and for a synopsis or just to get my opinion, I'll give it to you now real quick, but you should stay around and listen to all of it because I'll get into more specifics as to things that seem weird or don't make sense. But his answer to how do you win friends and influence people is just to pretty generally be a good person, be a good listener, try to understand their side of you, try not to put people down when you talk to them, make them feel important, kind of stuff that is generally understood as just not being a bad person. And overall, I don't think the book really needs to be read by everybody or listened to by everybody. It's perfectly fine if you have a spare 7 or 8 hours on an audiobook to kill. But if you remotely work with people in any capacity, you probably won't see anything that changes your actions or the way you talk. Now, if you want to hear a little bit more about my deeper thoughts and why I decided to talk about this, it's because this book felt really weird to listen to. Not because of anything that was said in it, not because of anything that was implied by it, but the whole book felt dated. That's kind of my first issue, is that this book feels dated. It is an older book, and it is a product of its time, and it doesn't necessarily do anything bad or anything that needs to be really revised, but it does look at the world in the scope of how it is, in that it references a lot of stories from people who work in businesses as salesmen or on the factory floor, and most of the time that just isn't a thing in current era. Salesmen don't necessarily need to go door to door or work out of a location, and factory floors or factory managers just aren't as many now. I specifically think of a story he shared from somebody where the child was having problems and wetting the bed, and they were trying to figure out, they couldn't ever get the kid to stop doing it, and they never understood why. So the solution they got to was they went out and bought him a bed of his own that he could sleep in. Now, the other part of that I kind of skipped around was that he was sharing his bed with his grandma, and also was wearing those kinds of old-fashioned nightgowns, like the long flowy nightgowns that you typically would have put girls from the 50s in. And I had to pause the book when I was listening to it on that moment, because that just felt very on the nose. Of course, this kid is going to not want to sleep in a bed with his grandparent and wear clothes that he's not comfortable with. Their answer was to go get him his own bed and get him pajamas, pants, and a shirt like his father wore. And the kind of most interesting part of all this was that they never straight up asked the kid. They just kind of decided that there must be something with the bed, and told the kid, hey, do you want your own bed? And the kid went, yeah, of course I want my own bed. As if to say that they hadn't just asked the kid why he was doing this in the first place, it wouldn't have changed. They did note that when they told they yelled at the kid to stop doing it, and he just said it wasn't him, he blamed his grandma. The general thing that kind of throws itself to me is just that they didn't ask the child what was the problem or if anything made them uncomfortable, and the solution would have just been as easily solved had they done so. And in reality, a lot of the stories that get presented from people who took his course for this or from Dale Carnegie himself all kind of end up with that same solution. If you had just asked the person or listened to the person to what they want, they would have likely solved the problem. In fact, he makes a whole chapter spending the point about how you need to understand their point of view, but never really understands that he should just ask to get their point of view, and instead just tells you to try to imagine and figure it out. I really think that that is a incredible sign of the times when this was written, because there's that kind of men should just know and shouldn't have to ask or shouldn't have to learn. They should just know and have the answers kind of a ideology to it. And that kind of an ideology is really rough for a lot of modern times. It's interesting because from a business perspective, Dale really tries to sell this concept that if you just meet your employees at a friendly level, they'll give you harder work or dedication or things like that. I don't know if it held true then, but I know for a fact it does not hold true now. I think that simply being nice or kind to your employees does not make enough for them to work harder for you. He asks a question at one point in his book to say, if you're a manager, what do you need to do to get your employees to work harder and work longer hours and work committed and stay committed and stick around? He phrases the question with follow-up answers that are like, do you give them more money? Do you let them take time off to themselves? Do you give them the chance to be in charge? No, you just have to be nice to them and you have to tell them that they're appreciated. And there's no world in current era of 2020s where people will do more simply because they feel appreciated. Not in the world where people are feeling underpaid or feel like they're expendable. Sure, being appreciated is a nice thing, and I'm not going to say that you shouldn't appreciate your employees, but that alone is not going to get people to work harder or do more for you. And it reads as very, very tone deaf in a lot of ways, especially in current era where people are struggling. It's an interesting mix-up too, because he talks about how do you get people to your side and how do you get people to work harder for you, and respecting people and giving people what they want. Most people in this modern era don't just want to be acknowledged or appreciated. That only goes so much. Most people nowadays just need enough money to live. Getting acknowledgement or respect isn't something that should be a secondary thought to a living wage. It should just be a guaranteed thing. If you are an employer and you have employees under you, you should just treat them like people and not just like things that are earning money for you or doing your work. I've only thought about this book a couple times after finishing it, but the things I've thought about have ranged between, this is so easy and common sense, how do people survive in this world without just considering the other person? And there are a lot of people who don't think like this or think that modern businesses don't even come close to touching these things. The average business nowadays doesn't treat its employee with that kind of respect or control over their lives or understanding of what they really want. I think businesses and people in charge of things not understanding the people below them is such a commonplace experience that this almost needs to be read if you are in charge of people or understood. In a perfect world, we wouldn't let people be in charge of other people without understanding or reading these kinds of books anyways, but nowadays there are people that are just allowed to be in charge of people that have no clue how to interact with them and don't understand what really motivates people. I really wanted to like this book. I really did. I think the part that tears me up about this is that there are some moments where it really teaches you like a genuine social skill or a way to interact with someone that is just a good habit and a good way to be. And then some of the later parts kind of just teach you to make the other person feel more important to then get what you want out of it. But I guess business is business, right? Business has always been transactionary. Companies will always try to get what they truly want, even if it means trying to sell you what they want. Advertising is so deceptive like that. It's constantly about trying to get you to either feel bad about yourself or feel good about yourself to buy the product. And that kind of advertising and selling has always worked, so there really is no secret to how to get people to like you or to sway them to your side. All it really comes down to is just being a good person and treating them like you'd want to be treated. Dale Carnegie knew it, and he could have said it in a lot less words. Instead, I had to listen to 8 hours to figure out things I already knew. Oh well, he got the book sold, didn't he?